So we're in the home stretch now. We just have a few more quick slides to get through and then we'll wrap up chapter 2. I have yet another slide just to give a schematic about how we can think about the big ideas. So we always want you to be thinking about the really big ideas in this course. Why are we doing what we're doing? So again, we want to know about these individuals. We want to know about a population. We attempt to the best of our ability to take a random selection of individuals from this population, or at least a selection of individuals that we can argue is representative of the population. That's what we have to work with. That's our sample. And then from the sample, we're going to try to make an inference back to the population. We're going to try to infer something about the population or conclude something about the population. So we want to be trying to do the best possible job in terms of taking that selection of individuals from the population so that we can reach a valid conclusion about what's going on in the population. So let's put the pieces together by going through another quick article that was in the news not terribly long ago. So what we hope that you're going to be able to get in the habit of doing is looking at articles like this and identifying certain pieces or identifying how some of what you're reading about in Stat 1350 is appearing in these different media pieces. So identifying who the population is, who the sample is, thinking about the type of sample that was taken, thinking about problems that could have occurred in terms of taking the sample or in terms of trying to make conclusions back to the population. Okay, so here's another headline. Do dog owners take more pictures of their pet than their spouse? Or this is a question I asked you. I think I asked this of you in our first chapter video, chapter 1 video. Here's the headline. Dog owners take more pictures of their pet than their spouse, new study says. So I saw this and I was really curious about the methods. So whenever I see claims like this, I really want to go and find out the details. I want to know, how did they reach this conclusion? Who did they talk to? What kind of questions were being asked? Who was in the sample? When was the sample taken? Here's a little blurb from the news article. Research revealed that 65% of dog owners admit to taking more photos of their dog than their significant other. The study also revealed that nearly half of people polled say they find it harder to leave their dog for a week than their human counterpart. So again, I thought that was really interesting and I wanted to know more of the details. So I dug around a little bit. I tried to find out as much as I could about this survey. I found out that this was a Rover.com survey. I don't know if any of you have heard of Rover.com. I'll tell you about it in a moment. Conducted by Wakefield Research among 1,000 dog owners in June 2016. So that gives me some information. I know a little bit about the sample. I know when they were sampled. I know who was doing the sampling. As I was reading the article, one thing that was a little bit unclear is the original article had lots of different claims about dog owners, and as you read the details a little bit more, it seemed like the claims were coming from different surveys. So it appears that some of the findings in the article come from a different Rover.com survey that was conducted in April 2015. I wasn't quite sure which findings were coming from which surveys, and it seemed like there were some other surveys as well that were mixed up in there, so it was kind of confusing when I started to look more carefully at the details. And it turns out that, so I had never actually heard of Rover.com, and Rover.com is the nation's largest network of 5-star pet sitters and dog walkers. So let's think about the information that we have just here. And think about what's here and what's missing. So it's not really clear. So we have a sample of size 1,000 or maybe. So we have different samples of size 1,000. It appears to me that these are probably voluntary response samples. From what I could glean from reading the article, I think that maybe some survey questions were put up on Rover.com and people could decide to respond to them if they wanted to. It wasn't really clear from what I was reading if that was the case, but it also wasn't clear if attempts were made to take a random sample. Because I was reading a lot about the online website and about They mentioned using like a Google survey or Google spreadsheets or something. It just made it sound like they probably collected their information online, which would seem to indicate that people were volunteering to respond. And because of the fact that this is the nation's largest network of 5-star pet sitters and dog walkers, it made me kind of wonder who was actually in the sample. So they make this claim about dog owners, and clearly, you know, if you're a pet sitter or a dog walker, you might be a dog owner, but you might not be. So I don't know if the people who were participating in the survey were just pet sitters and dog walkers and not dog owners in general. There's just a lot I don't really know about the sample, so I'm a little bit cautious in my interpretation of the final results. I'm skeptical about the final results. I'm skeptical if these results really apply to all dog owners. But again, what are some questions that we can answer here? From the information we have, what kinds of things can we answer? Who is the sample? So we know the sample was the 1,000 individuals who were contacted or who took part in the survey. So we know the sample size was 1,000. We don't really know a lot more about the sample. Again, I don't really know, were these just people who were connected normally to Rover.com? Are they pet sitters and dog walkers? Are they just any dog owners in general? I don't really know much about the demographics of the sample, the ages of individuals in the sample. Were they predominantly one gender or another gender? You know, I just don't really know. I don't know a lot of details about the sample, and I would want to know more details if I'm going to try to say something about the population based on this sample. Who is the population? Well, when you read that media report, it seems like they're saying something about dog owners. It seems like that's the population they're interested in. They're making a claim about dog owners. However, we know that the poll appeared on Rover.com, so could the population actually be pet sitters, dog walkers, just people connected with Rover.com? So who is this sample really a subset of? I guess that's kind of what I'm kind of getting at. We want to say something about dog owners, but is this sample really a subset of dog owners? It seems like dog owners is our final population. That's the population we're interested in. But is that really the population we were sampling from? So when we ask you questions like this, when we ask you who the population is, think about that original research question. Who does it seem that we're making an inference about? That's probably who the population is, but you have to think really carefully about whether the sample is an accurate reflection of that population. Is it a good representation of that population? So I'm hoping that made sense. But again, just knowing that the population is the bigger group, the sample is the subset of that group. Do we know what type of sample we have? I think we probably have voluntary response. But again, I'm going to put a question mark here because it wasn't really clear in what I was reading just how people were responding. They never said, well, we put this survey question on our Rover.com site and people could decide to respond if they wanted to, or they had a certain amount of time to respond. We don't know if the same person responded multiple times. Could each person only respond once? There are lots of things that just were not told to us in this particular media article. What more do we need to know in order to understand the conclusions of the study? Well, clearly I think we would need to know all of the things that I've already been talking about. How were people sampled? Who exactly was in the sample? Were these dog owners in general or just people involved in the Rover.com site? Were they just pet sitters and dog walkers? What kind of questions were even being asked of them? How were the questions worded? So certainly those types of things could have an impact on the data that we collect, on the responses that are given. And those are things that we're going to get into more when we get into chapters 3 and 4. So just to foreshadow what's coming up, in chapters 3 and 4 we're going to talk more about sampling in the real world, problems that can occur in sampling. We're going to talk about wording issues and sample size issues and how all of those things are really important in terms of trying again to make the best possible inferences we can about what's going on in the population. So I'm going to stop here. As always with these videos, if something is not quite making sense, please let us know. And please keep in mind that these videos are not meant to take the place of the textbook. In the videos, I'm trying to elaborate on things that are in the text, things that we feel are important, but we still want you to be reading through your textbook and using that in conjunction with the videos in order to make the most sense of the material. So thanks everyone. We'll see you again in our next set of videos.